episode 21. Before we get started, I wanted to mention, so Merging Hearts, which is the community that sponsors this event and many others, we now have a donation thing where you can scan a QR code. It's a nonprofit organization. We use basically the money from it to have a place to have events like this. Sometimes the events require paying someone to come, but I'm doing it for free so that we can have more of this. But yeah, if you feel so inclined, we have that there. Okay, so where were we last time? We were into Better Call Saul season 2, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, and Better Call Saul ended with he got fired. Right. Let me see if I can actually maybe close one of these lights just so we can have some more vibrant colors. Oh, there we go. How about that? That good? Okay. Yeah. So Saul became king, sort of the accidental king. He didn't really want to be king, but he became one anyway. And we sort of saw how the various episodes in his story focus in on his mindset, and how he moves from a very humble, unassuming guy to someone who's very doesn't always make the right choices, right? And so one of the questions of what is the meaning of this? Is this a story about the corruption of power? Is it a story about a personal descent? The story opens up ways of reading it that suggest this maybe. But anyway, we remembered that there was this guy, the prophet Samuel, who kind of put him in charge, and then he blew it twice, and he discovered his kingship will not endure. And both of these kind of rejection letters, there was this cryptic reference to Yahweh seeking out a man after his own heart to replace you, basically, right? A neighbor of yours who's better than you. Well, what does that mean? And we haven't heard anything about this now, but now that he's definitively fired, the story moves on to the replacement. So um, Samuel is still mourning because I guess he kind of liked Saul. Maybe he just liked him because he got to yell at him all the time. But we have Yahweh calling out to Samuel, saying, stop grieving for him. Get get with the replacement. Fill your horn with oil. Remember that the way you appoint a king is pour oil on their head. And be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem, for from among his sons I've decided on a king. Okay, so now we know where the new king will be found. And if we remember a couple weeks back, before we were looking at the book of Samuel, remember we looked at the book of Ruth. I think that was our first episode back from summer break. And I remember in the book of Ruth, it was a story about this woman, Ruth, who marries this guy, Boaz, and has a son. And their son, Oded, sort of is born at the end of the story. And we're told there's a genealogy where Oded had a son named Jesse. And so now we're kind of going back to that Ruth story. And we suddenly find, okay, well, that's an important family tree because now the new king's gonna come from that family somehow. So, but before he goes, sorry, he objects. He says, "Well, how can I go? If I go to appoint a new king, the existing king will hear of it and kill me." Well, that's an interesting statement because up until now, Saul has been very, contrite whenever Samuel gets on his case, and he's like, "Okay, why would he want to kill him? I mean, why would it seems to presume a very different Saul than we're used to.
Power.
He's tasted power. Maybe this is sort of one of those foreshadowings in all good stories where you kind of anticipate what might come, and indeed it will come. We'll see. But maybe because he's a prophet and he knows these things, maybe he read the script ahead of time. Who knows? But anyway, he's worried that kingship will actually seek to protect itself, even though Saul's like, "Ugh." Okay, so he says, "Don't worry. Take a heifer along and say, I'm just coming to do your local sacrifice in town. Invite Jesse, and I will tell you what to do." Okay, so at least he has some marching orders. So he takes his cow and his heifer, I guess, and he goes to the town of Jesse. He gets there, and the elders come out trembling, asking, "Is your visit peaceful, O seer?" This is the first time we've seen the role of the seer or the prophet as something that people are afraid of. And this is often in many cultures, not just this one. You have the figure of the medicine man, the witch doctor, whatever, or the sorcerer who can either do good or do damage, right? And so you want to make sure if someone who has these powers is coming to town, are you here on a friendly mission? And he says, yeah, sure, I'm here friendly. I'm just here to offer a sacrifice. Okay, so we make sure the family line that will bring this king to come to the sacrifice too. And then we get one of those nice threesomes where it's like one person came up and he says, no, that's not the one. Another person, that's not the one. Another person knows that's not the one. So Jesse has a lot of sons. So he has like the eldest son come up first and says, surely this is the one. But then I guess he gets this silent voiceover in his head. No, it's not this guy. And this comment that God does not see according to appearance, he sees into the heart. Well, that sounds nice. Um, but still, it doesn't really help Samuel figure out who's who here. So another son comes by and he says, no, not this guy. Another one, no, not this guy either. Finally, they line them all the sons up and it's none of them. So God is playing hard to get here. And as he says, do we have any more? Says, oh yeah, by the way, there's a little guy out there tending the sheep, the youngest son. Well, of course, it's going to be the youngest son. So he calls for this son to come, and they're going to, and wow, it's David. This guy is cut. It's a beautiful sculpture. I mean, just, it's amazingly beautiful. So apparently, this is where Michelangelo's inspiration came from. Ruddy, youthful with beautiful eyes and good looking. Well, who can argue with that? And immediately, there it is, anoint this one. Okay, so David. All right, so here we have a famous painting of David being anointed from, I think, the 1600s. So he gets anointed like Saul was anointed. And we're told, just like when Saul got kind of possessed by the divine spirit and had an ecstatic experience, we're told that the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon David. Okay, so he is now appointed. We're now at chapter 16 of the book. He will not become king until book 2. So this is another kind of complication. Okay, he's chosen a new king, but the existing, the lame duck king is still in office. And so a lot of the majority of the rest of this book is about the relationship between the heir apparent and the existing monarch. And it's uncertain exactly whether and when Saul figures out that this guy is his replacement. And that apparently is part and parcel to the tension between them. So basically, the story is that the awareness of this kid and his popularity and all the other things he does is what will drive Saul into more and more psychosis and eventually will lead to his own death. Okay, so Samuel sets out back for home, having accomplished his mission. Meanwhile, uh, with the spirit of kingship having fallen upon a new candidate, we're told the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul and he was tormented by an evil spirit from the Lord. Okay, it's unlikely that we're talking about like a demon or something like that. In the Old Testament, with a couple of exceptions that are in the late literature, you don't have any notion of malevolent spirits, but when it says spirit, it means like he had a bad attitude. He was in a bad way. We might kind of psychoanalyze him here with some sort of depression or whatever. But in any case, he's not himself anymore. And because of this, his servants say, well, what are we going to do about this? Well, if you want, we can get someone who will look after you, someone who can play a harp. The music tames the savage beast idea, maybe. So whenever this spirit comes to you, he'll play and you'll feel better. So this is like the equivalent of NyQuil is good music.
Or music therapy.
Music therapy. I bet there'll be a music therapy in this building sometimes. Yeah. So he's clearly unhappy. So we're going to try it. And they say, oh, by the way, there's this guy named Jesse who has a son who's a skillful harpist. He's also a brave warrior and an able speaker and a handsome young man. Surely the Lord will be with this guy. He says, just find me a harpist. Okay, well, notice something here. We haven't been told that young David is a harpist. in the previous scene. We just told that he's a shepherd, right? He was certainly not a mighty warrior in the other story, but now he's a mighty warrior. What we have here is not like time has passed and we haven't noticed it and he's gained all these skills. No, there are two different traditions that are embedded in this book. Two different traditions about how David came to be the kind of person he was and how he entered into the service of the existing king. This is story number one. And we'll see this again, that these two sort of traditions have been kind of woven together without much attempt to smooth over the differences. So, for example, Saul is going to get into this guy David here, and then later on he's going to show up and who's this guy? So this is very typical of scribal activities. Scribes generally don't like to throw anything away. Sometimes they'll edit something, but generally the goal of the scribe is to preserve the traditions. And so if there are two traditions, you preserve them both. Anyway, let's go on here. Okay, so they say, oh, we want this guy to help us. So they send him. Jesse sends him with some stuff. I guess these are like gifts for the king, some loaves of bread, wine, and a young goat. Hopefully those are pleasing gifts to the king. And he sends his son. And he enters into Saul's service. And we're told Saul became very fond of him and made him his armor bearer, which makes it even odder that he doesn't know who he is later on. Maybe part of his evil spirit was amnesia. Who knows? Okay, so he says, I like this guy. And so we're told whenever he felt bad, David would play for him and the evil spirit would leave him. Okay, so far. Okay, meanwhile, back to the grand Game of Kings epic. The Philistines are causing trouble again. They're attacking. The Israelites are getting ready for a battle in this valley here. And so there's going to be a war. And what is Saul going to do about it? And here we have our famous antagonist, Goliath, who we're told was pretty tall. This is actually kind of a bit of an exaggeration. 6 cubits in a span would be like 9.5 feet, which is still pretty big, right? Okay, so he's a big guy. We're told all the armor he has is very impressive. He has a javelin that is uh, big as a weaver's beam, so it's like this massive weapon. Okay, so he's their champion. So now we're kind of in Homeric territory here, where you have big fighters and stuff. And we're told, wow, that's really big. Okay. He comes up and he says, okay, we don't need to fight one another. Just one person fights me, and whoever wins, that'll be the decider of the battle. And so he says, come on, send me someone to defeat. And we're told that no one on the Israelite side wanted to fight him. They were stunned and terrified. Even the king. Oh, too bad for Saul there. So they have a problem. Meanwhile, we get the introduction to David part 2. So here we're told there was this guy named David. Oh, I thought we already introduced him. Yes. So he is now not in Saul's service. Rather, his brothers are in Saul's service, and his job is to bring them food and stuff to the battleground. So he's going to go bring them food. And meanwhile, the Goliath keeps yelling. And so he said, yeah, bring some food to your brothers. So he's going to bring them to his brothers. He says, hi, brothers. He gets there and they reunite. While he's talking to his brothers again, the giant guy is doing his thing. And everyone says, oh, by the way, the king is going to, whoever kills him, the king will make a wealthy man. He'll give his daughter to him in marriage and dedicate his father's family, declare his family exempt from taxes. Wow. So tax remission, a marriage, and a lot of wealth. David's thinking about this. But he puts it in a roundabout way. He says, well, why isn't anyone responding? Why should this guy insult us and insult the God and all that? And bro says, shut up, stay out of this. This is man's work. And calls him arrogant and dishonest. And he says, what have I done? I'm just talking. Again, big brother, little brother, right? Okay. However, the king hears what David says. So he sends for him. And he says, don't worry, I will go fight this guy. And Saul's like, hey, you're a bit small. You can't do it. You are only a youth, while he was a warrior from his youth. Notice in this version, David's not a mighty warrior like in the other one. Okay. So he says, no way can you do this. But he says, oh, actually, I have a lot of experience defeating dangerous, animals like lions and tigers and bears. He talks about saving his sheep whenever the bear attacks it. So if I can kill these animals, I could certainly kill this Philistine. And he says, the same Lord who delivered me from the mouth of the lion and the bear will deliver me from this guy. He says, go, Yahweh will be with you. Okay, so the king tries to put armor on him because you have to have armor to fight, but it's too big for him. Again, he clearly is not a warrior, otherwise he would have this stuff already. So he's going to fight without armor. He says, I can't do this. I'm not used to, I can't wear armor. So he goes out, does his own thing, gets his stones for his sling, and starts marching out towards the giant. And the Philistines marching towards it. It's very cinematic here. It's like David's marching towards them. They're marching towards them. The camera angle keeps switching back and forth. Finally, they stand next to it. Maybe that's, if David's still a kid, maybe that's accurate size. And the Philistine, we're told he starts to insult him. He says, am I a dog that you come against me with a staff? I'll feed you to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Again, that's very Homeric. So how does David respond? With this long thing. He says, you come against me with all your power. I come against you with the name of Yahweh Tzavaoth. That means the God who commands armies. And so he makes this a theological struggle, and he says, I'm going to destroy you. So they immediately set to fight, and we're told he flings that stone, hits him right square in the head, knocks him dead. So he defeats the bad guy, and immediately he goes and grabs the sword, and this is Peter Paul Rubens' famous painting of him beheading Goliath. By the way, on Wikimedia Commons, where you have all the classical artwork, there's like 85 paintings of the beheading for some reason. They really like that scene. So he defeats, he shames the insulting guy. Okay, and all the other army flees, and so he helps them win the day. Caravaggio, one of my favorites, beautiful Renaissance painter there. So he takes the head back to Jerusalem. This is kind of weird because Jerusalem is not an Israelite city at this time. Seems a bit anachronistic here. But anyway, he keeps Goliath's armor as spoils. But he has to, this is the version where they don't know who he is. So the king's like, who is that young man? And they say, let's find out who he is. So they find out, and they say, who are you? I'm the son of Jesse. So now he's going to enter into his service again. Here's a question, though. So we all know the story, right? It's a very famous story. Was David really the one who killed him, though? There's another story, another notice in the second volume of Samuel, where it has a long list of military victories of David and his great warriors. This is after he's king. And in this version, it says Elhanan, son of Yair, another sort of fellow townsman from Bethlehem, he was the one who killed Goliath, according to this. Now, unless there was another giant named Goliath from the same city with a spear the size of a weaver's beam, it sounds like there's a tradition that David didn't kill him. So if that's the case, I mean, we don't know. This past can be known. We have narratives, but if this other warrior of David killed this guy, why would you want a story that had David kill him? That raises the question of when the story was composed. Who was the audience? I mean, was this the tradition of? Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Elhanan killed Goliath later in David's career, and this was a great victory. Well, often the king claims the victory of the subordinate, right? So it's possible that the story of David as a kid is a kind of glorification of David, right? Perhaps totally fictional. I don't know. But it's interesting that there is this other tradition. And obviously, the scribe putting this together didn't think it was an embarrassment. First, you have to have the king kill the bad guy, right? But he preserves this. Now, again, maybe there was another Goliath. Who knows? But interesting piece. Okay, anyway. Meanwhile, David gets in good with Saul's son, Jonathan, who we met last time, right? He was kind of the noble warrior who helped win victories earlier. We're told that just by seeing him again, seeing Michelangelo's David, who wouldn't be attracted by him, we're told Jonathan's life became bound up with David's life. He loved him as his very self. Um, and we're told that David stayed on with the king, and so they became good friends. That'll become important in the story. They're such good friends that Jonathan gives him his own armor. It's like, you can wear my stuff. Okay, so he makes a friend. Okay, and we're told he starts to rise through the ranks pretty meteorically. Having defeated one guy, suddenly Saul puts him in charge of his army. And all of the senior officers agree. So again, everyone loves David in this version. And we're told that as David joined the king in various battles, everyone would praise them. The problem is that they would praise David more than they would praise the king, right? Saul has slain his thousands, but David has tens of thousands. Apparently, time has passed unless they're exaggerating. And we're told now this makes Saul resentful. Why does he get 10,000s and I just get thousands? All that remains for him is the kingship now. Now, we're not told that he is aware that Samuel anointed him, but notice his mentality now. Threat alert here, right? Popularity means threat means I need to watch this guy. We're told that from that day, Saul kept an evil eye on David. Sometimes it says a jealous eye, but literally it's the ayin ra'ah. The evil eye is a very, it's a cross-cultural, almost global symbol for envy, right? Envy is not the same as jealousy. Technically, jealousy is when you're trying to guard something that legitimately belongs to you. Envy is when you desire something that someone else has and you want to destroy them for it. And that's where Saul is going to go with this. Whether he's really aware of this or not, again, this is part of our sort of observing him from a distance as a character. But this becomes problematic for him. And we're told the Spirit comes upon him again while David is playing. And Saul just happened to be holding his spear, and he starts to say, what if I killed this guy? David, he's only thinking this. He sort of gets ready while David's not looking and says, no, I won't do it yet. So already we know that this is sort of fulfilling Samuel's fear that kings like to kill rivals. Okay, but we're told that he feared David because he saw the Lord was with him, but had turned away from him. Okay, so what is he going to do with his fear? His first response is to send him away from the palace. Fight my battles at a distance so I don't have him right here with me. And that then leads to more victories and more praise for him, which makes Saul more afraid. This is really the dynamic of this story, is that everything Saul tries to do to stave off what he perceives as a threat only makes it more threatening. Right? That's the paradox of ego, right? Okay, eventually he says, I'm going to have him marry a daughter of mine. Actually, I promised to give a daughter to whoever killed the Philistine, right? So he says, I'd like you to marry my daughter Merob. Doesn't say whether she's agreeing to this. Again, this is in any kind of monarchic dynasty. The monarch tends to just move people or family members around in marriage alliances without their real consent. So the idea here is, says, if you marry her, you be my warrior and fight all the battles. Well, I thought he was already doing that, but his rationale was, I will not have to kill him myself. I'll just send him into battle and hope the enemy kills him. Right? But David will not take the bait. He says, who am I and my father's clan? We're not royal. How could I be worthy of this? So this is really interesting too, because when we get into David's story later on, he's going to start behaving just like Saul. He's going to try to find ways to eliminate rivals without doing it directly. And he's learning all this from Saul, even though right now he's quite innocent. Okay, so, but David sees that the daughter is given away to someone else. Okay, so maybe that's mixed signals there from the king. Saul realizes that another daughter of his, Michal, loves David, and he says, I will offer her to him as a trap. And the trap is going to be, because if you marry my daughter, you have to give me a dowry payment, right? This is how marriages worked back then. The husband-to-be has to give a payment of some kind to the family of the woman he's marrying. So I'll just make the dowry like killing a lot of Philistines in a dangerous battle situation where he might die. Right? So he tries this. But again, David is kind of coy. He says, I want you to be my son-in-law. And he sends his servants to sort of convince David of this. But David, again, is like, how can I do this? I'm poor. I can't afford a dowry. And which is part of the setup. He says, okay, let's try this. All I want from him are the foreskins of 100 Philistines. Remember, Philistines aren't circumcised, so the way you show that you've killed them is by cutting their foreskins off. I guess it's sort of like, a scalp, the equivalent of a scalp, right? All I want is 100 of them, and that will be a perfectly good bride price. And so he says, oh, well, that's good. So again, kind of not really noticing what's going on. And of course, so he goes and does this, and this is kind of gruesome. It says he counted them out. In this art, he puts in a bag. Okay, anyway, he gets Michal as his wife, and he's happy about that. But again, Saul realizes, which I thought he already realized it, but he realizes again that his daughter really loves David, and David loves his daughter, and that makes him fear David all the more. So it's almost as though he's forgetting his original motive, and then he goes back to being afraid and figuring out a new scheme. So he's going to be David's enemy secretly. Okay. So he starts talking openly with his cabinet about just getting rid of David. And unfortunately, Jonathan, right, the son of Saul, is there too, and Jonathan's really close with David. So this doesn't bode well with him. Jonathan goes and warns David, my father's trying to kill you. Just stay out of sight for a while. I'm going to try to, talk you up as a good guy, and I'll tell you what dad says. So Jonathan has a conversation with his father, saying, there's no reason you should kill this guy. Look at all the wonderful things he's done. Don't do this. And so he's trying to reason with his father. His ultimate reason is don't shed innocent blood without cause. And Saul, at least verbally, agrees to this. He swears, he shall not be killed, I swear it. Okay, this is the first of many apparent resolutions to the problem that aren't actually resolutions. So Jonathan kind of, he reconciles the king and David, and everyone seems to be happy again. David goes out to war again, defeats enemies, and this is sort of placeholders. It's sort of like an interruption in the courtroom, in the royal court drama as he goes out and fights, and then meanwhile Saul is going back into his envy mode. So when he gets back, the evil spirit gets into him again, and he actually tries target practice on David here. And David gets away, however, by a quick dodge of the arm, it looks like. And that night in his home, Saul sends assassins to wait for him to come out of the house. The wife, Michal, says, you got to get out of here, you're going to die. So she helps him escape. So he gets out of the house, and meanwhile, she covers for him. She says, sorry, you can't see him, he's sick. And Saul says, I want to see him anyway. And when they go up to the room, pull the covers off, we're told they found teraphim in the bed and a tangle of goat's hair for a head. So she faked them out. Teraphim, we're not quite sure what they are. They appear to be household gods, like maybe ancestral deities or ancestors who've been deified. It's kind of odd for people who think about the Bible as a monotheistic text, because although the viewpoint of most of the books is you shouldn't have other gods, there are many instances in the story where people have gods all over the place, right? But anyway, she uses a divine image to sort of fake them out. Dad's not very happy. Why did you do this? And she lies. She says, well, he threatened me, saying, I'll kill you if I don't. Not sure how convincing that would be, because he was already had run off by the time she had to deceive them. But what does this tell us? It tells us that even the family members, right, of the king have to lie in order to keep him from doing something very terrible. So again, it's not just his individual flaws, it's the whole family is being affected by it. All right, David runs off. Where does he run to? He runs to Samuel, the guy who anointed him. And so he hangs out with him, hiding there. Saul finds out where he is and sends his officers to arrest David. And when they arrive, they are immediately taken up into a prophetic ecstasy. So it's like they're coming to get him, and then it's like, they lose control of themselves. Whether this is something Samuel is inducing or whether it's some divinely created diversion, it's kind of ironic because when Saul was first anointed, one of the signs of his anointing was that he went into a prophetic ecstasy. Right now, that same ecstasy serves to defend the new king against Saul's machinations, right? So they can't do anything. And again, it's sort of a threefold thing. He sent three sets of officers, and they all came back, as basket cases. Finally, Saul himself comes and says, "Where is David?" They tell him where he is. He goes there, and Saul gets into this ecstatic fury. So he too is sort of foiled by this spiritual experience. And we're told he remained in a prophetic state. He was naked, and Samuel shows up, which is odd because in that other story it said Samuel never saw him again. I guess he never saw him as himself. So, but you have this saying: "Is Saul also among the prophets?" That's the same saying that happened earlier in the story when Saul first became king. So again, now the sign of his kingship becomes the sign that he is interfering with kingship. Okay, meanwhile, David goes back to his friend Jonathan and says, "What have I done?" He's still clueless. Why does your dad hate me? And what crime or offenses am I being persecuted for? Jonathan too says, "Well, there's no reason you should be harmed. My father would never do this without telling me about it." And David says, "Well, actually, no, because your father knows that you dig me and that he wouldn't want you to tell me this. So we need to figure out some way to protect me." He says, "Whatever you say." Okay, so they're going to hatch their own plot. The plot um, is that David's going to send Jonathan back to dad during a feast, and have ask your dad about me, and depending on how he responds in public, come back and tell me, and then we'll figure out what to do. So he says, "Okay, I'll do this." And he also says, "By the way, if your dad says kill me, please kill me yourself, because I'd rather be killed by a friend than an enemy." He says, "No way, of course I wouldn't do that." Okay, so he says, "Let's go out to a field." So he hides him out in the field, and he says, "When I come back, I'll give you a sign. I'll come out with a bow, and I'll shoot an arrow, and I'll send my caddy out to get it. And whatever I tell the caddy, that will tell you whether to run or to stay." So it's a very elaborate kind of setup here, very secretive. Okay, um, and so he sets up this thing with his father. So at the feast, they notice David is missing. And so dad asks Jonathan, "Where is he? Why didn't he come to the feast?" Jonathan then makes an excuse. He says, "Well, he had to go home to his hometown. We're having a feast there. I can't be here for this feast. That's why he's not here," he says. Well, Saul's not convinced. In fact, he calls him a son of a rebellious woman. I guess that's an insult. I'm not sure exactly what the connotations of that are. But but what Saul says here again reveals kind of his mindset. He says basically, "Why are you protecting this guy?" Um, what back there? "Why are you protecting this guy? As long as the son of Jesse lives upon the earth, you cannot make good your claim to the kingship, i.e., when I die. Send for him, bring him to me, for he must die." And then again, he sort of publicly challenges his father. Why? What has he done? Right? And the father starts to, you know, make threatening motions with his spirit hymn. So he realizes there's no real way to change his dad's mind. So he goes out to the field where David is hiding. There he is hiding, I guess. There's Jonathan with his caddy, and sends that arrow out. And the sign is, "The arrow is farther on. Hurry, quick, don't delay," which is the sign for David to get going. Things are not good here. He sends the caddy back so he can be alone with David for a minute. They embrace, and we have this sort of parting thing. Go in peace, in keeping with the two of us, with what the two of us have sworn, that we will never harm one another. So we have this sort of permanent friend in the enemy's household. Okay, David goes. He has some men with him. He goes with his posse out into the countryside. He has no food, and he has to eat. His men have to eat. So he goes to a shrine at this place called Nob. And he goes to the priest there, and who also kind of trembles, like, what's going on here? Why are you showing up so suddenly? He says, oh, well, I'm here because the king gave me a mission and told me, don't let anyone else know what I'm doing. So I'm on a secret mission from the king. What can you give me? What food can you give me? So David has to lie in order to, he thinks he's protecting the guy, of course, by not telling him what's really going on. He says, well, I have some bread, but it's like sacred bread, so you have to be in a state of ritual purity to eat it. He says, of course, all my men are in a state of ritual purity. We can eat your bread. So he gives them some bread, and so they have food. And then we're told on the side, one of Saul's servants was there that day, um, this guy named Doeg, who is the chief of the king's shepherds. He sees what happens here. He sees David, he sees the priest help David, and he's going to cause trouble in the next scene. Um, he says, oh, by the way, if you need any weapons, right? Do you have any weapons? He says, yeah, I happen to have Goliath's sword. Well, how did that get there? Would you like Goliath's sword? He says, sure. Very famous Dutch painting of the giving of sword. There is none like it. Give it to me. Excalibur. Something like that. Okay, so David has a sword, he has food, and now he's ready to flee for his life. We're told the first place he goes is to the Philistines, the enemy. So Gath is the city that Goliath came from. So he goes to the enemy, presumably in the hopes that the enemy of my enemy is my friend idea. So he goes to this king Achish, and he's going to try to find refuge there. But before he can do that, the king's minions say, oh, I think this is David, right? This is the guy who's our enemy. And so David's, uh-oh. So in order to protect himself, he acts as though he is insane, right? We're told that he acted like a madman, drumming on the doors of the gate and drooling onto his beard. He has a beard now, I guess. Okay, so he fakes them out again. And he says, why do you bring this insane person in? Send him away. Okay, so he narrowly escapes being captured. It's a miscalculation to go to the enemies, but he's going to flee. So he can't go to the Philistines. He's going to go to a cave. And the family hears about it, and they all come to join him in the cave. So it's the family cave now. Not only did the family join him, a whole bunch of people who don't like Saul joined him. 400 of them, in fact. We're told all those who were in debt or embittered, he became their leader. So this is sort of the Iron Age version of Robin Hood, right? It's the noble who is now in exile and he's going to rob from the rich and give to the poor, something like that. He becomes a paramilitary group, basically, right? Bandits. Okay, so he goes, first of all, across the Jordan River. I guess that's the Jordan out there, to the king of Moab, which is one of the neighboring countries, and asks the king to take care of his parents, because I might be in a dangerous situation. So he says, okay, I'll do that. But a prophet shows up out of nowhere and says, don't remain here in exile, go back to the land of Judah. That's the land of his hometown. So he leaves the family there, but he's going to go back with his posse back into the homeland. Okay, so Saul hears about it. He hears about it, and he finds out where he is. Well, actually, before he says that, he upbraids his servant, saying, "Why did no one tell me that this guy was, had run off? Where is he? What is he trying to do?" He speaks of David as having conspired against him. So again, either he's lying to them or he really believes, which is also possible, he really believes that David is plotting to overthrow him. So you have this very complicated situation. At the supernatural level, David is sort of fated to become king, but David doesn't know that. I mean, David knows he's been anointed, but he has no intentions of doing this violently, whereas Saul assumes that he's going to be a violent usurper, and therefore he must be eliminated, right? Happily for him, Doeg, the guy who saw David, tells Saul, I saw him, and I saw someone helping him. This priest helped him. He gave him provisions and a sword. And so the king summons the priest that helped David, and he says, I have something to tell you or ask you. Why did you help this guy? Why are you conspiring against me? Again, there's a conspiracy theory here. You gave food and a weapon to my enemy. He may rise up against me in an ambush. Um, the priest says, I didn't know that he was your enemy, right? Publicly, he's not your enemy. I didn't do anything that was untoward. And Saul says, don't worry, you're going to die anyway with all your family. Okay, so now we're moving from trying to eliminate the threat to eliminating people who helped the threat, right? And to their to their credit, Saul's servants refused to carry out the order. Right? You can't kill priests. And so Saul gets upset. And so he says to the guy Doeg who saw them, he says, you do it. And so Doeg decides he's going to be the butcher, and he slaughters 85 priests. Um, he wipes out an entire genealogy in one day, right? Including the women, children, infants, oxen, donkeys, and sheep. Saul's kind of treating this like a holy war, right? Like the harem tradition, right? So he's really after this guy. One, however, escapes. This guy named Abiathar, that's him. One of the family escapes, flees to David, tells him what happens. David is sorry. He has a beard there now, I guess. And this is a really interesting character moment for David. He says, I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would certainly tell Saul, I'm responsible for the slaughter of all your family. So stay with me. I'll take care of you. No one will harm you over my dead body. Okay, that sounds noble. It sounds responsible. But look at what he said. He says, I knew that Saul would find out, and I did nothing to stop it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, he could have said, I'm endangering you. The king might find out. You might want to come with me. Or he could have, I don't know, maybe he could have come up with some other thing. Obviously, David is afraid, and so he's mainly seeking self-preservation. But this is an important character moment because when we see his own kind of descent later in life, this is his flaw. He does not take responsibility when other people are being harmed. Instead, he lets the harm take place. And so if there is a character arc, this is part of it. And this is the first time we see this. Okay, so he's contrite. He wants to make it right. Okay, so in the meantime, the Philistines attack the Israelites again, this town of Keilah, and David hears about it. Well, David's an outlaw, but the people from this town are coming to him for protection. So the question then becomes, are we just going to be out for ourselves to protect ourselves, or are we going to be like Robin Hood and help the oppressed, right? Instead of choosing, he consults God on it. And the way he it's not specific, but the way you consult God is by there's a little divination device on the priest that you ask a question and you get a yes or no answer. Sorry, let's go back there. Okay, so he asks, shall I go and help them? And God says, yes, go help them. The men complain, well, again, we are on the run. We're outlaws. What if we go? Who are we to fight against an enemy army, much less escape the king? Again, God says, go do it. I will deliver them into your power. And so they do. They win a battle against the Philistines. Everyone is thankful about this, and everything goes well. So here's the beginning of David as the good outlaw, basically. Right? He's out there for the people. Okay, Saul hears about it, and he says, aha, God has put him in my hand, for he has boxed himself in by entering a city with gates and bars. So Saul's going to try to besiege him. Notice that Saul believes that God is on his side, as most people often do. Of course he's on my side. I'm the king. Yeah, maybe my kingship won't last forever, but I'm still the king, right? So again, we see something of his mentality here. David, however, consults his divination device with the priest, and he finds out that Saul is coming, and he is also told, he asks, will the citizens of this town deliver me to the king? I saved them, but will they deliver me to the king? God says, yes, they will. You better get lost. And so he uses this. So the point of this side story is that God is helping him, right? He's helping. So really, it's Saul versus God here, right? God is whether it's by throwing people into a prophetic frenzy, or giving David inside information to escape the bad guy. Saul is really trying to go against God here, and he doesn't realize it. So they escape. They become itinerant. They wander about the country. And he's gained more men now. He has 600. So again, his force is growing. Okay, so they're living out in the desert, sort of avoiding Saul's patrols. And we're told that Jonathan comes to visit David. We're told he encouraged him in the Lord. I'm not quite sure what that expression means, but it is expressed through his encouragement that you shall be king over Israel, and I shall be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. So I guess maybe Jonathan is not entirely altruistic here. He believes that David will, how he knows this, we're not sure, but he believes David will be king inevitably. And initially he says, don't harm me or my family, but he says, make me your second in command. There's been a negotiation there. Okay, anyway, they shake on it. Meanwhile, Saul hears from other people where David is hiding, and he says, thank you for this information. Why don't you go, keep an eye on him so that I can capture him? And David and his band of renegades have to run for their lives. They have to go through a gorge to escape the king that keeps trying to flank him. They keep trying to box him in. And finally, right at the moment where the king is about to get him, a messenger comes and says, the Philistines are invading again. So fortunately, there's a war he has to go off and fight, and David escapes again. So all these sort of, hairbreadth escapes are a large part of this story. Okay, meanwhile, after the battle, he comes back looking for David. Again, a convenient informer tells Saul where they are. So he brings 3,000 men to search out David and capture him. And here we come to the turning point of our narrative, which is where we end tonight. So we're told that Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. People have to do that back then, just like now. What he didn't realize is that David and his men were hiding in the cave. Irony. We meet again. Okay, David's servants say, ha ha, this is the day about which God said to you, I, God, will deliver your enemy into your hand. Do with your enemy as you see fit. Well, if you go back through the story, you won't find a scene where God says, David, I will deliver your enemy into your hand. You may do with him as you see fit. There might have been something like that, but we don't know as the readers. All we know is that a character in the narrative is trying to frame for David the way he should see this opportunity, right? And he's saying, this is God doing this for you. So what does David see fit to do to this guy who's murdered priests and who has been chasing him around the country with this band of ragtag men? We're told that he moves up and cuts off an end from Saul's robe. So he doesn't kill him. He could have killed him because he was asleep. And then we're told he regretted that he had done this. And then we have a speech that explains this. He says, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to lay a hand on him, for he is the Lord's anointed. Well, technically he's not, but he was the Lord's anointed. So what does this tell us about David's mentality here? I mean, he says, I would, even though he's my enemy, even though he's trying to kill me, I would never lift a finger against him. Maybe I'll just keep running. What does that tell us about, assuming that David is being genuine here? How would we describe his character?
So he's got reverence and respect
Reverence and
for
respect.
the king that was anointed a
So,
long time ago.
so it's kind of like he respects the chair. He respects the throne, which he himself will occupy one day, right? But part of that respect is he has to respect the current office holder, right? Even if he's being notorious. So I would never do anything to him. Well, technically, he hasn't ignored his servant's advice. It says, God is allowing you to do with him as you see fit. So apparently David believes that. So what he sees fit to do is not to kill him. But he has this little piece of cloth from Saul's robe. He doesn't allow his men to kill him. Saul gets ready to leave the cave without seeing them. And then David jumps out and says, my lord, the king. David bows, face to the ground in homage. So again, definitely respect there. He's very conspicuously holding this. He's going to explain about it. He says, why are you listening to those who say, I'm trying to harm you? which is ironic because no one is telling Saul this. What's telling him is his own head, right? But this is out of a gesture of respect, and maybe also it's a strategy, right? Rather than saying, "Why are you trying to do this?" Is it, why is someone else telling you this? That gives a little off ramp for Saul if he wants, right? It's not him. You're not to blame, of course. You're the king. Someone else is telling you this. And then he explains what he did, right? I was told to kill you by my servants, but I took pity on you instead. I decided I will not raise my hand against my master, for he is the Lord's anointed. Uh, Look here, my father, again, using the family language there, since he is his son-in-law. Here's the end of your robe. Right? I cut it off rather than kill you. Be convinced that I plan no harm and no rebellion. I've done you no wrong, though you are hunting me and to take my life. Okay, so he's putting himself, so he has respect, certainly. He's also willing to put himself in a vulnerable position, right? Now, again, the text doesn't tell us, and the text rarely tells us what's going on inside people's heads. Sometimes it does. How would we, is he just trying to save his skin here, or is he genuinely trying to bring father-in-law about into a better relationship, perhaps? What do we think about this? What be going through David's mind right now? I mean, we know he reverences him and all that. Do we think, I mean, is this just, and it could be both. I mean, it could also be a survival tactic, right? I'm going to throw all the arguments at him that I can to make him see sense. But he does put himself in a place of vulnerability to do so.
To answer that, I think we have to imagine, well, what would have happened if they did kill him?
Ah,
Um, would his henchmen go after him then? Would that have made him even more vulnerable? He
possibly.
decided not to do that, so now he's kind of negotiating his best outcome
Okay.
by promising this fealty.
So this could be, I mean, there could be a kind of pragmatism here, like, well, I could kill him, but then I would be more vulnerable. We can't fight his army. He has 3,000 men with him, right? We have what, 600? Still, it's bad odds.
And he is telling the truth here.
He is.
I mean,
Yeah. He's not making it up, certainly,
it's
but
that simple.
but it's kind of like he's not making it, but he has created the facts, right, by choosing to do what he did, right? So that's pretty important that he's not simply reactive here. He's being deliberate in how he's going to frame this. So that's one way of thinking about it, and it fits very much with the way we've seen kings behaving in the past, that if you kill a king, if you usurp a king, then you become a target for someone else, right? That's been the pattern up until now. Maybe he wants not to keep that pattern going. Any other thoughts about kind of what might be motivating him here?
Like it's interesting that there's been such a focus on his relationship with Jonathan through this
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
Like to have like such like a brotherhood between two men.
Yep.
And I wonder if part of it is because he doesn't want to destroy that relationship.
Ooh.
Because if he were to kill his father, whether
Ah,
he agrees that he's a bad man or not, that's
right.
still his dad.
So that would harm his deepest friendship too.
And the same thing is true with, at this point, he's only got one wife.
Mhm.
Only
Was-
one.
Well.
Yeah.
at
He will
this
have many
point,
more for now. For now, he is monogamous. Yeah, so yeah, there are a lot of, and I think you're good to bring that up because you were right. So much has been developed, that relationship, that kind of lateral relationship within the household. Is not just him and the king. It's also he doesn't want to destroy the lives of the king's family either, and his wife presumably too. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into this. Now let's see. He continues this. This is what we call David's apology. Not like apology, like I'm sorry, but apology as in I'm defending myself. Um, so after doing this, he says, still, you've done wrong. May the Lord exact justice from you in my case, but I shall not do it. And then he gives him a proverb. He says, there's an old proverb, from the wicked comes wickedness. Thus I will not lay a hand on you. From the wicked comes wickedness. So what is it? How do you think he's trying to relate that to his choice not to kill Saul? From the wicked comes wickedness.
Told you I'd be wicked.
I would be wicked, maybe. Or maybe Saul is being wicked and he doesn't want to be infected by that wickedness, perhaps too. And then there's this, who am I? That why do you see me as the center of this threat? I'm just a dog, a flea, right? He's self-deprecating here. The Lord be judge, may he defend me against you. Okay, so he gives this long, appeal. Saul is affected by it, at least apparently. Uh, he weeps. Is that your voice, my son David? After he's seen him for several lines. He admits that David is more in the right than I am. This is an important expression. It was used first in the book of Genesis. Remember, in the ancestor of Israel, there's this story about the ancestor of David's tribe, actually Judah, who marries his sons off to a woman, and his sons keep dying, and to keep her in the family, he is required to give her in marriage to the youngest son, but he doesn't. So he tries to cut her out of the family, and so then she dresses up as a prostitute and propositions him and impregnates herself with him. And then when he finds out, he says, "She's whored about. Let's burn her." And then she says, "Ah, but you're the father." And then he says, "She is more in the right than I." It's some notion of comparative justice here. So it's a pretty now if he is genuine about that, that's a pretty big admission, right? Because so far his mindset has been delusional. Now apparently David's appeal has broken through that fog, and he acknowledges this. He says, "You have treated me graciously. I have treated you badly. You've declared this day how you've treated me graciously. God delivered me into your hand, and you did not kill me. If someone comes upon an enemy, do they do this? Of course not. So may the Lord reward you graciously for what you have done this day." Well, how is he going to reward him? He says, this is all talking here. He says, "Since I know that you will certainly become king, and that the kingship over Israel shall come into your possession, swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants, you won't kill my descendants, and that you will not blot out my name from my father's house." Same kind of protective thing that Jonathan asked him. David swears the oath. Sure. David is, has a great deal of integrity in these stories. He swears these oaths. He's going to break every one of them in the next book. Every one of them. So again, like I said, initially it seems like we have a bad Saul and a good David, right? And that's certainly true. But as we'll see when David becomes king, he won't do the same thing Saul does, but we'll see that the flaws that we're going to see that we saw earlier today and then what we'll see next week on his way up, they will haunt him and they will lead him to break all of these promises. That's the tragedy. And so this is setting up a tragedy, but he himself is out. So there we go. That is it seems like the problem has been resolved, right? And yet there's 3 more chapters in the book. We'll see that Saul goes back into his delusion, right? And he will repeat a lot of the same behaviors that he has been showing, and that David will again have him at his mercy and show him that he could have killed him and didn't. Saul will have another sad scene of, "I'm sorry that I did this. You're right. I'm wrong." But the repetition is interesting. That this is a pretty powerful speech David gave. He was able to bring the father-in-law back to some kind of healing, I guess, healing moment.
We're still in First Samuel.
We're still in First Samuel. So the first volume ends with Saul's death. And so next week we'll get to see how Saul relapses and how he dies, and then what David does after that, right, when he actually becomes king. And it's going to be a very messy situation, as it turns out. So again, what's interesting about this story? It's a grand epic, kind of like a Frank Herbert novel, but like a Frank Herbert novel, there's also ambiguity in the hero that will become more and more evident. So when we ask why write this? Well, if this was simply meant to be a self-congratulatory narrative that the king wanted written about himself, it actually shows a great deal of vulnerability in him, right? Now, it may just be that we don't know who wrote it. It may have been a scribe of David. It might have been one of his descendants, scribes, whatever it might be. But it's David is one of the, outside of the Torah, where Moses is sort of the most complex character. David is the most fully developed character in the Bible in terms of psychology, in terms of what he does, in terms of all of the ins and outs and twists and turns. So we'll be looking to see what happens on his rise to power next time.
It's almost Shakespearean.
It is very Shakespearean, is it not?
Yeah, and he was credited with develop a character, finally, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Now, of course, what's different about this than like a modern novel is that the development is not in the words, it's what lies between the words, right? It evokes scenes for us, the readers, to say, what's going on here? And in some ways, that's more powerful. It doesn't detail all these things. It gives it in the freedom of the reader to infer what's happening, and also to derive whatever lesson, if there's a lesson or a moral to the story, what it might be. But it is definitely complicated. There's no simple good guy, bad guy here, right? Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you all next week for